Hey, and welcome to the highlights of episode number 275 with Alisa Vitti. Some of my favorite parts of this episode were when she talks about the Infradian biological rhythm, what it is, and how to use it to transform your periods. I also loved it when she shared about the cycle syncing method and how we can sync our cycle. But there is so much more wisdom and knowledge that you get in the full episode. This episode is for every single female, no matter what age you are. It is so powerful and information that we all need. So to listen to the full podcast and get all the info in the show notes, head on over to melissaambrosini.com/273 right now. Beautiful Alisa, I am so excited to have you with us today. Can you tell us your story and how you got to where you are today doing this incredible work that you do for women? How did this all unfold for you?
Gosh, I guess it started in stages, but it started first with my fascination about periods, because when I first heard about them, I had never gotten the talk from my mom. So I first encountered that I would have a period in, I think it was 6th grade. And I was astonished, amazed, excited, awestruck. And then I didn't get my period until I was almost 16. And then I only had a bleed maybe 4 or 5 times until I was 22. So I had this initial excitement and fascination that was followed by basically a hormonal crisis. And then with that, not just missing periods, but also was starting to have more and more symptoms. I was gaining weight. And at the top of my weight, I was probably 210 pounds and just covered in face, chest, and back in cystic acne, depressed, anxious, couldn't sleep at night. And then, of course, was still not getting my period. And no one had any insights as to why I wasn't getting my period, why I was gaining all this weight, et cetera, et cetera. And so it was one of my insomniacal nights. I was in the library at Hopkins and I found a little tiny article in an obstetrics journal about Stein-Leventhal disease, which was the original name given to polycystic ovarian syndrome. And I just remember reading through the classic presentation and checking off all the internal boxes like, this is me. So I took that document, that paper, to my gynecologist the next morning and insisted on the right tests. And she confirmed my diagnosis that day. She said, you figured out what this is. Good for you. And I said, okay, great. Now what do we do? And Melissa, she basically, in that conversation, gave me a pretty heavy diagnosis and prognosis of continued obesity, likelihood for diabetes, increased risk for heart disease and cancer. And then, of course, basically infertility. If I was going to ever get pregnant, it wouldn't be naturally. And, that basically there was no cure. And they'd have to medicate me with all sorts of different things along the way as symptoms got progressively worse. And, I was maybe 21 at the time. And I thought to myself, this is not my future. I had this very strong inner voice that said, no, let's go do something else. And that really was the moment where my life changed, my health changed, my career unfolded in this way now that I do this work. But it all came down to that particular moment where I decided to take matters into my own hands. And this was when I really said, okay, what can I really do to shift the performance of my endocrine system? If food and lifestyle can manipulate gene expression, absolutely it is a logical conclusion that food and lifestyle inputs can manipulate glandular function in the endocrine system. And you have to remember, this was 20 years ago, before functional medicine existed, before there was a name for this. So I was really on my own to experiment with how to get the endocrine system to perform.
I want to know, so you talk about how hormones affect everything and our lifestyle and food, they turn our genes on and off. And when we experience things like acne, cramps, headaches, irritability, exhaustion, irregular cycles, heavy bleeding, clotting, infertility, low sex drive, and food cravings that something's going on and that you don't have to live with those things and that there is something that we can do about it. What's going on here and how do our hormones play into this? What is going on and what are the solutions?
What's going on at the highest level, because, fundamentally is that all of those symptoms are a sign of a hormone imbalance. Typically, it's for a lot of women, it's a lot of estrogen overload. You've got to think that we're exposed to so many what's referred to as xenoestrogenic compounds, so chemicals that mimic estrogen in the body, things that are like in your skincare, your cleaning products, the pollutants in the environment around you, in the drinking water. So we're being exposed to more xenoestrogenic compounds than ever before in human history. And just to give it some perspective at how hard it is for ovaries in today's moment, snapshot in human history, we're exposed to more chemicals in a 30-day period than our grandparents were exposed to for their entire lives. So we have to work harder than we've ever needed to historically to protect our hormones, to eliminate the toxic estrogen overload, and to really use food as a powerful tool to do a lot of the heavy lifting that we may not have had to do, let's say, in our grandparents' generation.
So where do we start? Like for anyone who's listening who is experiencing PCOS or any of the other symptoms that we've mentioned, where do we begin?
Well, I think the first thing to do is always track where you're having your symptoms and when. So tracking where you are in the cycle is a really powerful first step, and which symptoms you're having when, because then it just helps for you to identify really what's going on for you. So it's interesting to understand, where you're vulnerable in your cycle the most, and then to really start targeting what you can do from there. But the FLO protocol really takes it down to the deepest level, which is you can troubleshoot certain parts of where you are in the cycle. But if you want to really get your endocrine system to be optimized, the first thing you have to do is to absolutely stabilize your blood sugar. That was the big sort of incredible revelation from my early research, was if you want the endocrine system to do anything with hormones, you have to make sure that the brain, the heart, and the muscle tissue are getting adequate supply of glucose continuously. And then you want to move into really flushing cortisol levels. You want to then move into really working on breaking down estrogen and making sure your microbiome and your elimination is working properly. If you do these three things, whatever symptom you have, whatever menstrual condition you have, it will absolutely start to resolve itself, because you are now supporting the endocrine system the way it wants to work, how it wants to work, how it wants to be nurtured. And if you do that, then it can start to do its job, which is to produce balanced hormones, eliminate hormones efficiently as quickly through the body as possible, and keep you energized, mood stable, and, looking beautiful, because that's what your hormones are designed to do.
In WomanCode, you talk about how we can perfect our cycle. So how do we do that?
There's an optimal cycle, yes. And, I really love talking to women about checking the color of their bleed every month, because it's like a live hormone test that in real time, it gives you a great snapshot into what's happening. So what you want to do to optimize your cycle, to perfect your cycle, again, is to recognize you may have a diagnosis, you may have already a condition, you may have just PMS. Going through those first three steps of the FLO protocol that I describe in WomanCode is critical for you to reestablish endocrine function. And then you want to check your cycle every month, and you want to say, okay, what color is it? What's the consistency? How long is my bleed? Am I having any symptoms? And really trying to get to a place where you're having that optimal flow, which is 4 to 7 days, nice, fresh, healthy red color, clot-free, and pain-free. That is an optimal cycle. And that is absolutely something that you can biohack. However, if you're eating the wrong kinds of fats, fats that are high in omega-6, heavily processed vegetable oils, etc. You're going to jack up the production of PGE2 and suppress the production of PGE1 and 3, and you're going to have more cramps. So you can literally eat your way out of cramps within 2 cycles. We've been deprived of a very critical piece of information. So we as women in our reproductive years have something very special, a special biological rhythm. We all know about the circadian rhythm, right? The one that is aligned with the solar pattern, right? The sun rises and sunset, and how our pineal glands are stimulated by sunlight, and we make melatonin around that and all of that. But for women in their reproductive years, you have a second, equally, if not more important, biological rhythm called the Infradian rhythm. Infradian rhythm is a cycle that is longer than a day. And in women, we experience that in our monthly cycle, right? A 28-day cycle. It turns out that this infradian rhythm impacts not just your reproductive system, but your brain, your metabolism, your immune system, your microbiome, and your stress response system. The reason why we're all, as women, so sick hormonally, not where we want to be with our weight, feeling all of these symptoms, feeling fatigued, feeling overwhelmed, feeling like we're not where we want to be in our lives. The reason why that is happening is because we are working against our infradian rhythm. And just like we know how toxic and dangerous it is to work against our circadian rhythm, it is equally toxic and dangerous to work against the infradian rhythm. And we've been doing it constantly.
So what does that look like for us? How does that look, and how can we support the infradian rhythm?
So that's what I map out in the book. In fact, the book has chart after chart. It has a food chart so you have these 4 distinct hormonal patterns that occur throughout the cycle of your follicular, ovulatory, luteal, and menstrual phase. You have specific hormonal ratios. Just like the guys have a particular concentration of testosterone and cortisol in the morning, you have specific concentrations of estrogen, progesterone, testosterone, luteinizing hormone, follicular stimulating hormone in different concentrations in 4 predictable weeks, right? They change 4 times over the course of the month. And you have to change what you're eating because your metabolism changes, your caloric needs change. In order for your body to produce these hormones and break these hormones down, you have to change what you're eating each of those weeks. You have to change how you exercise each of those weeks. And you also want to organize your work projects around what is optimal for your brain chemistry in each of those 4 phases. But it's really an exciting way to live because you're basing it on your actual biochemistry.
Can you give us a little bit of a rundown on each of the 4 phases, and what are some of the things that we can expect in each of those phases?
It isn't about certain times of the month you're happy, energized, wonderful version of yourself. And then the other times you're like the sleepy bear in the cave. That's not the expectation that we should have. You feel subtle shifts. It's very subtle. If they're extreme, then your hormones are a little out of balance. So in the follicular phase, you have low levels of most of your hormones, but you have the initiation of an increase in serum concentration of estrogen in the bloodstream. And that just stimulates the ovary to start maturing some follicles for eventual ovulation. But it also has a proliferative effect on your brain chemistry. It makes you open and curious and interested to be stimulated in new ways. Then in the ovulatory phase, you get a huge surge of estrogen. And you also have the presence of luteinizing hormone and follicular stimulating hormone. But this huge surge in estrogen stimulates the verbal and social centers of your brain. It also stimulates one egg to be released from the ovary. And this is a really interesting time because, this is your most outward facing moment, but it's the shortest time of the month, right? It's only 3 to 4 days ovulation. So it's your shortest window is this massive outward facing. So it gives you the longest phase, which is after ovulation, which is the luteal phase. And this is 10 to 14 days, depending on what is normal for your cycle. And this is when we have some of the most exciting hormonal ratios present. We have the introduction of progesterone makes its debut onto the scene during the month. And we have a surge of estrogen and progesterone, and then also a decline in serum concentration of these hormones when conception doesn't take place. And then we move into the menstrual phase, which is the time of the cycle where the right and left hemisphere of the brain communicate with each other maximally across the corpus callosum, which, by the way, is bigger in women, making us more successful at solving complex problems. So we are at this time better able to evaluate any situation, any area of our life, and solve problems and figure out what to do and how to course correct.
I want to ask you about the cycle syncing method. What's that and how do we do it?
It's the actual self-care program that you do for food, fitness, and time management that is based on your biology and your hormonal biological rhythm. Once you really master this with your self-care, you can really start to transform other areas of your life that don't have to do with your self-care, like your work environment. And what I have experienced is that practicing this method, coming home to my body, aligning with my biology, has been the most profoundly healing experience as a female that I've ever experienced. It's balanced my masculine and feminine energy, and it's really helped me feel connected to a peaceful, compassionate energy. And I think that is something that we all need.
I'd love to hear about your morning routine at each 4 of the phases. Like how does it shift each time? Or is there a few things that you consistently do throughout the 4 phases? Or is it completely different? Can you talk us through each one?
Yeah. So in the follicular phase, I like to do kind of morning stretch, and then I'll do a workout midday. So that's how I kind of balance my morning energy. So I'll stretch in the morning, I'll meditate, but I like to get in my body first with stretching and not just go right into meditation. Then I'll meditate, and then I just get right into my day. You know, I'm a mom, so I'll be with my daughter doing breakfast, and part of the ritual is eating the right food at the right time in the right phase. So I'll make the breakfast that is appropriate for me, and that's part of my morning routine. And then in my ovulatory phase, I really like to get up and do like a walking meditation. I'll go outside, I'll be out in nature, and I'll move my body first in the morning. And then I'll come back and meditate and get to work. In the first half of my luteal phase, I might do the same. In the second half of my luteal phase, I will do meditation first before I move my body. And then I might do, some sort of Pilates at any point in the day when I feel interested in doing that. So I don't hold myself to a morning workout in the second half of my luteal phase. I just try to do it when it feels right to me during the day. And then in my menstrual phase, I'll wake up and I typically have a lot of vivid dreams. So I'll do a lot of journaling, and then I will either meditate or I won't, depending how I'm feeling after the journaling experience. And then again, the food that I'm eating and then the movement that I'll do is very, very restorative, typically later in the afternoon.
I think the younger that women get these books in their hands, the better. What age would you recommend they read your books? Like, would you say 10 or what do you think?
No, 10's a little young. I think, I would say that by 10, I would want young girls to be aware that they will have a second clock waking up in their bodies at some point soon, and that's going to make them feel and want different things week over week within a month, just to introduce that conceptually to them. And then I think somewhere around 12, 13 for them to read a book like In the Flow would be, alongside their mom, would be pretty powerful. But what other book would I want them to read? Gosh, there are just so many important books. I think Natalie Ainger's book, Vagina, is an important book. I think Clarissa Pinkola Estes' book, Women Who Run with the Wolves, is incredibly important.
What about for both sexes? Is there a particular book that we could put in the curriculum for both sexes?
I think The Four Agreements.
Yes.
Would be an excellent book for both genders, because to the very simple premise of that book about personal integrity and commitment is such an important concept to lay as a foundation in your life as a young adult or an emerging young adult. And to really, if you were to get that at a young age, it would really just set you up for such huge success and positive, healthy relationships with everyone and including yourself.